Mr Chair.
I call Brett Hudson.
Mr Chair, Mr Chair, Mr Chair.
Denied. I call Megan Woods.
Mr Chairman, and I'm very happy to take a call on this commencement clause. And Mr Chairman, with the greatest respect, I have listened to your calls to move on beyond the royal assent. But Mr Chairman, it has become somewhat of a debating point in this House tonight around the circumstances in which the Governor-General on behalf of the Sovereign can actually could they or when could they refuse royal assent? So, Mr Chairman, when such questions come up, being the hard-working parliamentarian that I am, I like to go to the source and consult McGee to see what the circumstances under which this could occur. So, Mr Chairman, I think it is important that we clear up this debating point in this House tonight and actually see what the facts are around this. So, there is no longer explicit statutory recognition of a power to withhold the royal assent as there was in a previous law. And this was admitted in 1986 as being unnecessary. It was felt that to reenact
Order.
it then...
Just
Yes,
for clarification for the member,
yes.
Speculation as to the inclination of the Sovereign or the Governor-General is not relevant to the detail of this clause. I've previously warned all members that we've pretty much covered this ground. So I ask the member to explore new territory, take us to new depths in this clause.
Just speaking to the point of order, Mr Speaker.
Not challenging it in any way.
I'm seeking your clarification, Mr Speaker, and asking for some guidance from you, Mr Chairman. And that there has been a debating point established in this debate around whether or not, I am not questioning the reputation of the Sovereign or whether or not they could do that, but I'm just asking your guidance, Mr Chairman, how it is that a member can address what has become a debating point in this debate.
Well, fortunately, for me as Chair, I'm the sole judge of the scope of this debate, and I have judged that we have traversed that. I believe that it's reached the full extent of the scope in relation to the royal assent in this matter, and we're looking for new territory. And if the member hasn't got any new territory to explore, there are plenty of other people seeking the call, Mr Farfoy for one.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I appreciate your guidance in this matter. It's always useful to have your wisdom shared with us, Mr Chairman. We always appreciate it greatly. Now, Mr Chairman, in terms of the commencement date in which this Act receives the royal assent and when it comes into date, my colleague Chris Hipkins has already talked about when that might be. But Mr Chairman, I think there are some serious matters that remain unresolved around when it is and how it is we treat taxation law in regard to the royal assent, because it goes back to some of the material that was covered, and there's a clear intersection here between clauses 1 and 2 around what it is that this bill is called. That this is called a development levy bill, but in reality this is a taxation bill. And as my colleague, the Honourable David Cunliffe, has pointed out in his previous contribution, that actually there's some very serious questions that we need to ask around taxation law and how that may be treated. What, for example, and Mr Cunliffe raised a very serious point of how the Regulations Review Committee, if this were going through a regular select committee process, how it might be treated and how it is that this might have to be treated differently, Mr Chairman, because I think it is important that when we are using this mechanism of urgency that we aren't circumventing what are some very important conventions in this House, and that is that people in this country need to have the peace of mind that they don't have a government or a parliament, indeed, that will pass legislation that unfairly taxes, that there are important checks on that, and one of those is that we shouldn't be doing it under urgency, and that if we are, that we should at least be putting some of the normal procedures around it. And I know that whether or not the Sovereign would give this piece of legislation royal assent has been ruled out. So that is not something that we would assent, that we would ever consider talking about again, Mr Chairman. But I'm sure other members of our team here in Labour will have very serious questions that they will need to raise around this very important clause 2 of this legislation, being the commencement clause, because, Mr Chairman, we should always ask the serious questions of any bill that we as legislators are asked to pass. We should never just think of ourselves as rubber stampers. We should examine legislation clause by clause, and we should always be asking, especially when we are not going through the proper processes that we would expect of a select committee in this House. So, Mr Chairman, there are important questions to be answered, and I invite the Minister to take a call and to address some of these very, very important questions that members have put to him, because this is what we deserve as a parliament, Mr Chairman.
Christopher.